Let's speak to political analyst Ongama Mtimka to look at what President Ramaphosa needs to address later. But firstly, Ongama, how do you think this got so big so quickly?
Good evening, Francis, and your viewers. So quite interesting here. It looks like it's a conflation of a number of interests. So one, we know that there are people who were displeased by the incarceration of former President Zuma, and they did threaten that there would be chaos if he were to be incarcerated. So that's a known fact. Secondly, we know too that there's what we call in conflict research a permissive environment. A permissive environment would be the existence of conditions such as inequality, unemployment, and poverty in the case of South Africa, which creates some latent conflict. So what we are seeing here is the nexus between this political opportunity, the political moment of the incarceration of President Zuma, and the exploitation of existing grievances by political elites that are associated with that to instigate something of this nature, as they had threatened. Otherwise, without those threats, we wouldn't be able to draw the links quite in precise terms as as I am attempting currently.
Well, because of a lack of service delivery, because of inequality, because of unemployment and poverty, some analysts have been saying for years that South Africa is sitting on a powder keg. Could this be the spark that leads to mass rioting across several provinces? Or is that overblown? Do you think this can be dealt with pretty quickly if there's political will and the right things are done?
I think it can be dealt with pretty quickly. Remember that you need resources to kind of instigate these kinds of things. It's proven in conflict research that the existence of a permissive environment does not itself result in an outbreak of conflict or things like this. So in order for conflict to arise, you need political elites who've got vested interests in something else to actually instigate. So I feel that the state can work here and nip this in the bud by making sure that they act against those that are proven to be instigators. And I think that that can be done pretty easily by narrowing down on those that have been caught in the public domain first, threatening that they would undertake this action, and making sure that following legal processes and track their conversations, because this is a national security issue, and such tracking obviously borders between political persecution and national security concerns. And I think that as long as prima facie evidence was presented, and there's plenty of it in the public domain in the events leading up to Nkandla, that certain people are persons of interest, that should actually be monitored and their conversations be tracked and determination be made as to whether they are involved in the instigation. But I think it's important to bear in mind that nothing will replace effective policing. And the fact that the army has been called on board, I see many people are frowning at that. But the nature of the practical things on the ground necessitates that capacity to police is boosted. And it doesn't help to have ideologues in society, and opposition parties, for example, can sometimes maintain these ideological purity positions and not appreciate the pragmatic calls that have got to be made at the level of securing the interests of the state in a particular given moment.
Well, on that note, let's look at what Julius Malema, head of the EFF, tweeted 6 hours ago. No soldiers on our streets, otherwise we are joining. So the EFF not distancing itself, but saying that they will join. All fighters must be ready. They won't kill us all. We need a political solution to a political problem, not soldiers.
That's a very unfortunate statement on many fronts. As a general statement on any day without the context that we are seeing, fine. in a situation where we have evidently seen this national police service failing to contain the kinds of looting that we have seen, that statement is devoid of the practical realities on the ground, and it's the kind of ideologue talk that is in abstract and appeals to, being prone to be for the underdog, but in fact is very reckless in terms of what's actually happening. And you do not need at this stage people who can instigate a lot more people to go and protest when the state is trying to, address this issue of the criminality that we have seen, the blatant criminality, which needs the security forces of the Republic.
Yeah. Ongama, earlier you were talking about a permissive environment on its own that doesn't lead to things like we're seeing, but it's there. And I'd like to look back at how police behaved around the gathering at Nkandla. And it must be very difficult. The police minister, Bheki Cele, said, look, there are people with guns there. We don't want to go in and exacerbate the situation. That could be catastrophic. And yes, that is true. I mean, imagine people had been shot and killed. We would all be saying there's blood on the hands of government. And this comes after Marikana, and we're so scared. Has Marikana complicated everything?
Absolutely. So and by the way, Francis, I quite agreed with the stance of the police with respect to the Nkandla situation, especially given the fact that there the political posturing was to induce the state to act in a way that would trigger violence. And besides, it was unnecessary because the deadline for arresting former President Jacob Zuma had not yet kicked in. Now, my issue is that some things of this nature are an emerging target. You're looking at something that's fast changing, and it calls for what is called situational leadership which applies itself to the facts as they are emerging and take the right corrective action. So while I did not agree with the agitations last week to send the army or special forces to Nkandla, now the situation is different. You've got to treat this, and also what Julius Malema calls a political solution is actually a very silly oversimplification of a rule of law versus chaos and disorder environment. To simply characterize it as a political solution would be to accede to the very political gambit of those that have instigated this chaos, to have this seen purely on the basis of a political issue rather than an attack on the constitutional order of the Republic. And to have a member of parliament whose interest should be the rule of law of the Republic, along with the conduct of political power, reduce something which is a direct frontal attack on the rule of law to be a political problem. It smacks of what politicians sometimes do, which is attempting to appeal to popular views and not actually take the responsibility of safeguarding the values of our democracy, which are meant to secure it.
Finally, do you agree with those who think that maybe the President Cyril Ramaphosa actually exacerbated things last night when he said there's an element of ethnic mobilization here? And what do you expect him to say tonight?
There's a tendency in South Africa to fabricate people's meanings on things. There was a very clear ethnic mobilization here. And when you label attempts at ethnic mobilization, that's not the same thing as saying a particular ethnic group is responsible for this. You're labeling the attempts by some to mobilize along ethnic lines, and that is something that should be called out in a democracy, because it's not something that's actually should be done in a democracy. In South Africa, we had the long struggle of that was premised on African nationalism, the idea that building the nation was more important than the separate nations that existed before colonialism. So whenever those are exploited, it's always very dangerous. And I think that calling that out is not wrong as far as I'm concerned. I understand the people that are concerned that when the president mentions it, he may perhaps be increasing chances of being misunderstood and be seen to be blaming a particular ethnic group for what's happening. And I don't think the message of the president in terms of what he said and the connotations arising from it was anything close to you blaming a particular ethnic group, except to call out the activities of certain unscrupulous political leaders who are actually mobilizing along ethnic lines.
All right, we have to leave it there. Thank you for your analysis tonight, Ongama Mtimka, political analyst. Tributes now.